right, well, it is 3 o'clock. Thank you so much, everyone that has been here for the earlier sessions. My name is Shelley Reed, and we are starting our 3 o'clock session for our afternoon of AI. And we're here with Quinten Steenhuis, Sateesh Nori, and Michael Hofrichter, who are going to share on how to integrate AI into legal practice and the legal aid field with some of their special products. So Satish, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Shelley. You guys might remember me from such trainings as prompting, which we did about 20 minutes ago. I'm really excited to welcome Quinten and Michael here. I'm going to talk as little as possible and allow you to see the great tools that they've been working on. But really quickly, what are we talking about here? Let me set the stage. We want to close the justice gap. Many of us know about this statistic. We hear it a lot. 92% of the civil legal needs in America go unmet. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough staff. AI can be a force multiplier. It can be the most effective tool that we've ever seen to increase our capacity. And we can be better, faster, cheaper in our delivery of access to legal assistance. Now, we say that all the time. I say this all the time, but what does it really mean? Well, this is where Quinten and Michael come in to show us the practical tools that they've been working on with their teams to get us closer to the goal of helping more people. So, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you. I've appropriated some of your slides. Please tell me if this is okay. Otherwise, feel free to share your own slide deck.
Sure. So I think when Quinten and I were talking about this initially, we talked about the fact that lots of us are really familiar with chatbots, and we've seen them all the time at this point. But to use it in an AI context, right, there needs to be some level of safety, security, right, recognizing what you can and can't use it for. One of the things that we've done at LegalServer is that we've made a chatbot available to our staff, right? We didn't make this available publicly, but we made it available to our staff, and we made it available to our staff in a way that we felt comfortable with, right? And recognize we're a software development company, right? We've got a mission for legal aid and to support all of you who are working in this field. But we still need to be able to build something, right? To build those tools and have these things available to us at the same time that we're not exposing client data, exposing our own internal code, that sort of thing. So one of the things that we did is we rolled out an internal version of LibreChat. LibreChat is an open source platform, but we're hosting it ourselves. We've been able to put in place various BAA agreements and the background. So it means that we can test all of the different major AI endpoints whenever we want. Right? And I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And this is what it looks like for us, right? I came in here earlier today and asked the question about, I've got a website that returns a JSON array. I need a Google Chrome extension. Not only did it answer me, but it also wrote my extension for me, right? Like it gave me the code and the preview that I might want to have alongside of it. But something like this means that I could switch. All right, well, that's what Claude told me. What about ChatGPT, right? And I could ask the same question. And so there's a lot of ways that we can use some of these tools to pull back what we need. And so this was something that I wanted to throw out there, right? I know that lots of groups have talked about putting out their own chatbot for internal use for staff. One thing that I would encourage you all to do is, right, everyone can get licenses to Azure, OpenAI, or something else like that. But if you do that, you're paying on a per license basis, right? If you're running one of these chatbot tools yourselves, right, you've got a scalability element to it where you've got the license for the API, you don't have to have a license per person. And I will, I think that's my point on this one. So
You see Ellis on the screen?
oh, Yes.
Yes.
So Ellis was our approach for something different. So for that, right, here is a test site. Right, many of you may recognize this sort of LegalServer site. This is actually a test site where we've got the red bar at the top. But one of the things that we've been playing with is making building a chatbot into LegalServer, right? And so our developer named this Ellis, right, as in LegalServer LS. And we've got this built in where we can ask for different types of help from the beginning. So I could come in here and I could say, right, how do I move files in the SharePoint integration, right? And this is then going to go and ask our help documentation and give us both an explanation of how to do it and a citation, right? And so here it's pointing me at this moving SharePoint folders document that I wrote yesterday, right? So it's already got all of this information and it's able to pull it back for you while you're still browsing within LegalServer. So this has been a fun extension that we're still building on. Right, we've got a couple others where we've played around with this. This is all using sort of a confined agent or RAG model, right? So if I wanted to ask about LSE things, right, I could say, what's the definition of a limited service case, right? And then this is going to go and take a look at some of the LSE regs and CSR manuals and come back and point us at some of the options that are available and definitions that are there. So that's what we've been experimenting with, right? We're not trying to solve everything with our chatbot. We're not building it out into all sorts of things, but we're trying to save some of your time as an administrator or a user, right, to get you to what, like the more fun stuff of, all right, let me draft something, let me write something fresh, new, as opposed to, all right, let me go look in documentation or help text or something somewhere else.
Oh, sorry, my screen is frozen. 1 sec.
So while Sateesh gets his screen back, we do have a question in the chat. Will Ellis be able to build reports in LegalServer? Can you ask it summary questions about clients or cases?
So those are all things that we've been looking at, right? And part of this is if we ask it stuff about clients or cases, then we want to make sure that it's confined, like where we're asking it generic stuff, right? Like this, like LSE content or LegalServer help information, right? That makes sense to use our AI accounts, right? Because, right, it's just general stuff. But if we start asking it things about your specific cases or your reports or something else like that, then in that instance, we might want to set this up to use your version of these Azure OpenAI endpoints or somewhere else, so that that information stays within your control as opposed to coming into like the general LegalServer arena. So that's stuff that we've looked at. It's definitely things we've been talking about. It's not ready for demo yet. On the other hand, right, talking about analyzing reports, right, that is something else that I'll get into later, where we've started looking at that as well. It's not yet available globally, but we're starting to roll out initial demos. So that's always something that you can reach out to support and ask to be involved in the beta programs.
Michael, can you describe the automated intake process? I've got the slide up here.
All right. So automated intake is saying, hey, we can't get everything all at the same time, right? I don't know about you, but when I was working for a legal aid organization, we'd go to a clinic, we'd come back and we'd have 2, 4 people entering all of those applications in by hand for the next week, right? And we were lucky if we finished them in a week, right? And sometimes we had 75 people, sometimes we had 150 cases, right? It's just this onslaught of all of this material that we have to retype and put into LegalServer. And so a couple of years ago, we started experimenting with how can we automate this process? How can we make this smoother and faster? And for some of our public defenders, right, those cases are coming from the court system, so they're able to say, like, hey, this is coming from the courts. Let me just make sure that we can read this information via API, and we can update and create these cases, right? And where we've got an API connection to the source, right, it's great because we don't have to parse anything. We know exactly what these fields mean. We've got definitions and we've got dictionaries. We actually rolled this out for one organization that they in the first year, they had about 180,000 API calls to update their site. We did some more looking, and between creating cases and updating cases, right? If that was 5 minutes for each API call that did an update, right? That would have been the equivalent of 22.5 FTEs. At 22.5 FTEs, they probably paid the equivalent of 1 or 2 FTEs for this project, but and they don't have 23 FTEs on staff, right? They're not a big agency, but because they implemented this tool, it meant that they could streamline so much of their work. We then said, all right, APIs are great, but not every place gives you APIs. And then when some of the AI vision models came along, we were like, oh, this is amazing. Let's see about taking what we're getting, running it through AI, and then creating the case from that. And so that's our automated intake. And I'm going to share my screen again. And in this case, right, here's my automated intake form within LegalServer, right? It just shows up as an additional intake process. And I'm going to say that I want to load a new intake, and I can pick actually which intake process I want to use, right? If I've got multiple. In this case, this is going to be a criminal intake, but I could also have done this with a civil intake process. And I'm just going to upload a file, right? And so in this instance, this is my file about Bart Simpson. And I clicked continue. And so now we're uploading that file, right? This is just a PDF. It could have been a zip file full of PDFs. We've actually also set this up so that it could be an email to a LegalServer email address. But, right, this is the case that we got, right? We've got a prosecuting attorney. We've got this case about Bart Simpson, who's a juvenile under 18 years of age. Right, they committed a possession of a controlled substance. We've got the parents, Marge and Homer. Right, we've even got a little page back here that's really hard to see. And if I zoom in, you'll notice that this is some handwritten notes, right, about his cell phone number and what zip code he lives in and his employer. And if we come back to LegalServer, you'll see that we've populated a whole bunch of this information, right? We populated the case number and the cell phone number and the zip code. We pulled that information from both the pleading and the handwritten page, right? We recognized that it was a possession of a controlled substance, right? So we're giving you as the end user the ability to see all the information that we extracted, make any tweaks or changes, and then you can begin your intake process. And when we're doing this, this has already filled out all of that information so that you as the end user don't have to retype it, right? We've made this a, the things that were easy, we've pulled straight from this. We've done a similar version of this where we're using a civil intake that had income and expenses and assets, right? So that's also something that can get pulled in, and we're looking at as different groups want to roll this out.
Can you talk a little bit about the time savings? You know, when you look at something like that, you think, oh, that's just 5 minutes of work. Why would I need this? So what's the sell on that? Like, why would we need this?
Well, I think a group that's going to want this is going to be a group that, yeah, this saves you 5 minutes, but this saves you 5 minutes 20 times a day, right? And when you start talking in those numbers, well, 5 minutes 20 times a day, that's almost 2 hours, right? If when I was a director, if my staff could spend 2 hours working with clients as opposed to doing data entry, that would be huge. And if it's not 20 cases a day, if it's 100 cases, if it's 50 cases, if it's only uh, like after your clinics and not all the time, right? That's a huge free up for your staff to do the more interesting, extensive, harder things that AI can't replace them for, right? When that's translating for a client phone call, that's writing letters to your client saying, here's what's next, that's calling the opposing party, right? To the extent that your staff can do the harder things, the more interesting things, arguably, right? That's always a plus for all of your staff.
Right. So we have two categories of questions that are blowing up the chat, relatively speaking. One is, when can we get this? When is this going to be available? And how much is it going to cost? And more importantly, when is it going to be available?
All right. So when is it going to be available? It's currently available in beta. So email support. We've got an open beta, right? The way that this works is that you have to be able to set up your own endpoints in Azure OpenAI, and then you feed the details of those endpoints back into LegalServer, so that we're using your version of OpenAI, right? That it's contained under your agreements with Azure, right? It's not using our accounts. It's not using someone else's accounts. It's your organization's accounts. So we're looking for groups that are going to be savvy enough to do that, set up on their own. We've got instructions for it on our help page, but it's still right fairly new in its infancy. Not everyone's going to be comfortable using Azure to do this setup. But in terms of pricing, that's also something that we're working out. Those questions, right, are still with Ivy to make a final call about pricing. I will say that there's likely going to be a monthly fee. There's likely going to be a one-time cost. I don't know what those are going to be. But it's also worth noting that while it's in beta, there aren't costs, right? And so while it's in beta, if you want to test on your demo site, right, that's something that you can certainly do.
So next question is the image capture. How low quality a handwritten note can this work with? And particularly clients who live in rural areas, maybe faxing documents to legal services organizations. What's the capability of something like this right now to capture data from those kinds of sources?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a hard line of like, this is too poor, right? One of the reasons that we said, and we built this so that you can see the image next to what we're able to pull with it, is so that you can double check, right? And so that if you do give us a really poor image, right, you've got the ability to make those corrections before you continue. Like we've done this with handwriting. We've taken examples where we wrote out stuff in handwriting, we crumpled up the paper, and then we took a picture of it. Right. So there's only so many sort of use cases where we can take an example, right? And then, but in terms of what the hard line is going to be, right, that's going to be one that comes from experience, not from necessarily our rigid testing.
Okay. And there's some comments in the chat about not knowing what Azure is or what any of what you just said really means. That's okay. I'm in that same boat. I'm just nodding my head to pretend like I understand. But I think the takeaway is, one, this is possible. Two, talk to your IT people. And if you have LegalServer, this is a possibility right now. And it's soon going to be probably commonplace. And so get ready for it. Ask questions. And we're going to make this training available so you can show your IT people the slides and say, look what I saw. Like, can we do this now? What would it take? And what's Azure? Whatever it takes. I think that's a good takeaway here. So before we pass it on to Quinten, I wanted to ask you to describe the two other things that, why do I keep doing that? I'm sorry. Note taking and there we go, case summaries. Can you talk a little bit about the case summary tool?
Sure. I'm going to go back. Well, you've got the slide up right now that shows this. So this was something that we built for a TIG. And the question was, we've got cases that have a plethora of notes. How can we figure out what's going on? Right? We want a quick way to summarize where we are in this case, what's going on. Right. So we built a tool that you can put on a case profile and say, give me a summary of this case. And we actually built it so that on the back end, you can add in specific custom fields that you want to send there as well, or specific case notes that you want to send it there as well. Or that you want to tweak the specific prompt, right? You were talking about prompt engineering in the last session, right? Here's a place where you get to practice that and do your own prompt engineering, right? On this, well, let me share my screen now. On this case here, right, I've actually got this prompt 3 times, right? I've got this one about case outcomes. I've got legal issue. Well, actually, these are different prompts. Here's the different prompts. Here's 3 different prompts. One that we just said is a basic case summary. One that we said we wanted something more for pro bono, and one that we wanted something more for supervisors. And if I were to look on the back end of this block, of these blocks, right, I've got these automated case summaries where I can give it different details about what to select, right? And I can choose what custom fields need to go in there as well to get passed over, right? And some of these, this one's marked as a pro bono, but we didn't give it a custom prompt. So we're just using our basic, give me a summary. But this one, for example, we said, write a legal summary tailored for supervisors who are managing users for this case, right? Prefix your user for supervisor summary and then a blank line and then your response, right? And so you can see that we've got different details and different responses from these. One of the nice things with these is that we made it so that you could edit these and save them and see a history of them, right? So that I can see the history of all of these. You'll notice that a couple of these are in Japanese because we were playing around with it and told the AI model to give us our prompt back in Japanese as opposed to in English. And so there's lots of options here for different ways that you can automatically generate a summary of these cases. The other piece that you mentioned, Sateesh, was which?
Smart Notes.
Smart Notes. Okay. So Smart Notes is another place where we said, hey, let's save everyone time. And so if I come over to this case and I click on case notes, in this case, right, you'll notice that there's 2 icons here that are not normally here on most of your versions of LegalServer. And this would let me open up a mobile device, take a picture of my handwritten notes, save myself some time, right? In this case, I'm just going to use another tab to upload some handwritten notes that I've got. And I can upload this note, right? Maybe it's an audio file, maybe it's handwritten notes, maybe it's a picture of the paperwork that I've done, right? This has successfully been updated. And then if I come back here, right, it's pulled out my handwritten notes. And this was something that was my handwriting, and I on yellow lined paper, and we pulled it out. We made it visible to all of you for this, right? So that, like, I don't know how many of us are in court and taking notes on paper because they don't want us to have a laptop open, or right, there's other things going on, right? But the ability to take a picture of our notes, right? Or if I wanted to, I could do speech to text, right? Wow. So this is what I'm talking about. Here's what we need to add into our case notes, right? I can put all of that information there, and then, right, then that gets added to my note as well, right? We just added that to the end, so that it's visible for your end users. And so these are two different tools that we're building into case notes. Again, trying to save you and your staff time, trying to save you and your staff from having to retype everything as well.
Great.
And
So
then
I'm going to preempt the obvious question, which is, when is this going to be available? And
same thing.
same thing. Okay.
Yep. It's in beta.
Okay.
And then there was one last tool that I wanted to talk about, which had to do with documents within LegalServer. And this is a document that got uploaded to LegalServer. In this case, right, we've got this is a long PDF, right? It's, I don't know, 10 pages from the Indigent Legal Services of New York, right? But I've got tools, and we've built in here the ability to summarize document, right, using AI. We've built in here the ability to write an outline using AI to see, like, what is this talking about? I don't have details, give me some more information, right? I want to see exactly about this outline, right? I don't know why it didn't give me that outline. But I can see that information, I can get that information back, right? We've also got the ability to ask questions of this, right? So what is a jurisdictional issue? Right, the ability to work within this document and pull in additional information out of it. Right? So I can find more information about jurisdictional issues on page 1, right, which is right where we're looking. And if this were a transcript, or if this was a video, we could transcribe it and give you the text of the transcription. If this was audio, right, again, transcription's available. And then we'd be able to indicate different participants within the document, right? To say, like, this is Tom speaking, this is Michael speaking, this is Sateesh speaking, that sort of thing. So these are, again, some other features that we're building out that we recognize, right? If we give you use cases for AI that are narrowly tailored and going to be going to save you and your staff a lot of time, right? And things that you're going to end up wanting to use a lot. And that's what we were looking to do.
That is awesome. So there's a lot in store from LegalServer, and I think many of us are going to benefit from it. Before I turn it over to Quinten, I wanted to ask you about the grants management piece. I know you guys are also working on some grants management tools, which I think for many of us, it's the least fun part of our jobs, but one of the most important, because we need to send information to the funders, but it's very time consuming and painful to do it. So can you talk a little bit about some of your grants management AI tools?
Yeah, so this is something that's in fairly active development right now. But we've all been there writing a grant report, right? You run the reports in LegalServer, you have to then analyze it and figure out what you're going to do with it. So many times grant reporting has to do with a single person, right, who knows how to handle this report and knows what to do with it, right? But where we can pass this information off um, to AI is, right, we can build out some of these examples. We can take from it the past reports to see what gets used. And then we're playing with the idea of and building out features that let you give it specific details that you want to do, right? So here's the report that I'm using. Give me a plain language response that lists the top legal problem codes and how many cases we closed, right? Or review the documents that I've labeled as staff experience and summarize our staff's experience with housing matters. Right? Taking the documents that are stored within LegalServer that are labeled for this grant, right, and pull out the information as opposed to having us retype some of this really generic, really frequently asked questions about our staff, our grants, our actions, right? And so it's starting by working with a prompt, tweaking those answers, and refining, making refinements to that as you build out your report. So that's what we're looking to do. It's still very much a piece in progress. This one, I don't think you can get beta access to just yet, but the others you can. And I'll throw in the chat some of the help pages that are related to what I've shown you here today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael. This is really great stuff to look forward to, and it's going to really help us all. Now I'm going to turn it over to Quinten and the team at Lemma. Over to you, Quinten.
All right, thanks, Sateesh. And what I'm going to talk about today are some projects that are pretty complementary to what Michael's been showing you. A lot of our work is directly with LegalServer as well. You can go to the next slide. Just a really quick shout out. There is a tool that we've been using internally at our team and also in my work at the Legal Innovation and Technology Lab at Suffolk with our students. Very similar to LibreChat, slightly different, but serves the same function called Open Web UI. And the idea is that we can have one API account that we can keep credit in, and as many students as need to use it occasionally can for a lower cost than the ChatGPT individual subscription would be, and also with a lot more control over the data privacy and security. Not much more to say than that about that tool, except it's enabled some really cool use cases for us. So we started playing around with it at Lemma, at my consulting organization. And pretty early on, there was a client that wanted to build kind of a user-facing custom GPT. I don't know if anyone has played around with custom GPTs yet, but essentially you give it a prompt and you say you want it to play a certain role that it's going to be able to play for every conversation. In this case, one of our clients wanted to build a negotiation avatar. A really interesting idea. He wanted it to be something different than you get out of the box. So it was trained on his own negotiating strategies. And that is something that you could do in a custom GPT pretty easily. But the problem is, how do you then share that with people outside of your organization? Without them each having their own individual ChatGPT subscription, it's not really possible. So LibreChat or Open Web UI, I think, would both give you the same capability. We used Open Web UI to help him set up that kind of custom interaction experience, and then students around the world actually are using it. Tomorrow, he's going to be doing a training with folks in Italy using this exact tool that is kind of enabled to be easier to share without having to meter usage in exactly the same way that you would if you're doing it inside the ChatGPT environment. Once you kind of get beyond that kind of prototyping experience where you're still kind of in this chat interface, it's a little bit more designed for that very linear experience. If you want to prototype tools using AI, a tool that I've really enjoyed using recently is called Streamlit. And I'm just put up screenshots here of two different prototype tools that we're using regularly now that take advantage of that as an interface. So on the left, you can see an AI-powered translation tool. We built a really quick interface. It took literally some folks in a meeting were saying, hey, we want to use a tool that we can use to give a draft language of documents to our internal staff to review, because we don't want to waste their time drafting all of the translation from scratch. Problems, obviously, with using ChatGPT or using even Google Translate for that, because of how, if you're using the free versions of those tools, you're sharing your data with them. So this is an interface that lets you take a document, upload it, get back a translated version of it as a draft on the left. And on the right, this was purely a prototype that's not in use. The tool on the left gets used every day, multiple times a day, to help with some quick translations. Literally, it was written in an hour, the first version of it. Maybe I spent 2 or 3 hours more refining it. On the right-hand side is a tool that was built in about the same amount of time, but it's really just at that prototype stage. You can see, you can do tasks like here, we're saying, analyze this document, tell us if it's an administrative warrant or a criminal warrant that needs to be responded to, and it can give you that really quick summary. Haven't been able to test to see if that's accurate enough to use in real life yet, but really interesting as a prototype. And that tool, Streamlit, again, is one that I like for that purpose. So some of you probably know that I am, I think, DocAssemble's evangelist in chief. So a lot of the other projects that I work with and that we are using AI in have DocAssemble at the core, and that includes our collaboration and the projects that we do together with LegalServer or making use of LegalServer's APIs. Here's one of those examples that I've shared. Some of you might have already seen. This is an AI-driven intake triage tool that we built for Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. You can find it on the Missouri Tenant Help website, motenanthelp.org. And what it does is it helps you understand if you qualify for help from the legal aid program. We're doing new intake projects now that kind of build on that original work. But where that takes us now is, I think, to the workflow docs. That's the kind of a loose brand that we've been playing around with. And the idea is, rather than building complex guided interviews for very simple documents that you have in the normal course of your work as a legal aid attorney, what can we do to help enable you to build really nice, high quality formatted documents that pull data from your LegalServer case management system or another case management system, if that's what you're using, and then put that into the document for you. So I'll do a quick screen share here. Yeah, actually, this is a good overview of the idea here. And the new thing that we're playing around with that is not in use by any clients yet, but I'll show you today, is integrations that use AI as well. The idea is you have some data source somewhere that's probably your case management system. In some cases, our clients are just using a DocAssemble questionnaire to get data from the client that they then reuse on multiple documents that might be things like basic letters that they need to send. We have DocAssemble as the engine to drive the forms and the logic, and then we can store that data somewhere in the world, whether that's back in LegalServer or into Microsoft 365 cloud environment, or again, some other alternative storage providers that folks are using. So let me show you what that looks like from the LegalServer side. So what I have here is a test case on the demo environment for Greater Boston Legal Services. And we've just built this case out with some fake data here. I have the LegalServer DocAssemble integration turned on this environment. So I have some different options here that I can take. So the first one I'll show you is this assemble documents task here. It's going to take all of the data from my LegalServer case and send it directly to DocAssemble. And it does that securely. Let me just turn off this kind of distracting. We're on our test environment. I'm going to turn off that for you all. So what I do is I have a few options at this point. All of my data is pulled in, and you can see that here. We kind of show you what matter you're working in and some basic information about the client. But we've captured all of the data from the case, including the case notes. We can pull in one of our pre-built templates. These are ones we might use over and over again. Greater Boston Legal Services is storing those in a SharePoint site. You can see things like just a basic letter, closing letter. We could upload a new template, or we can create an AI draft. Let me show you the very first AI-powered feature that we have, which is helping you prepare these templates for reuse again and again. Sometimes you do want a document created from scratch. Very often you have your template, you want to use that exact template with the same language again and again, just with your data put into it. So letting you create the labels with AI is a really nice bridge between those two possibilities. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a document that I have pre-prepared. This is just a letter that I've used a lot of times for these kind of demos. It is a sample demand letter for Massachusetts. You can see there's plenty of placeholders in the document, some of which are labeled, just kind of an open-ended way, like your name, your address, and some of which have kind of placeholder markers like curly brackets. This is not any official template language. This was just kind of set up by whoever created this template at the Attorney General's office many years ago. They've set it up this way with kind of instructions to the person who reads it as to what they're supposed to do to customize it. I can take that and upload it here to this auto labeling tool. And it's going to process that in the background. Takes a second or two to do that, but what it's doing is it's going through like all of the text of the document. We gave it an instruction that says, hey, if anything looks like it is meant to be a placeholder variable, mark that using the exact syntax that we expect on the docassemble side, and then let us review that and save it if it looks right. Very different to the old way, which would be to take this document, go through and say, okay, I'm going to read it. I'm going to replace your name with manually something like user0.name. And what happens when I do that? Of course, I might miss some things. I might make a typo. I might introduce an error into the template. I'm going to have to iterate on that again and again. And I might not catch everything, even if have working syntax the first time. So you can see here what it's done. It's taken our original document and it's done exactly what I was doing manually for me. It might need a little bit of cleanup, and this is something that you need to be ready to do. So it still does help to know a little bit about what is correct and what isn't. But you can see here we had this leftover word number left, and we had which is sought left over here. Other than that, I can tell you this all looks really good. This is accurate as to how I would want this template to be set up to actually work to solve the client's problem here. So that's the bridge from like documents you can use over and over again and that are exactly correct to ones that are fully enabled and powered by AI. But I'll show you what that looks like as well.
Quinten, we have a question in the chat
Oh, sure.
From Margaret about what if you need to tailor a given template down, cutting out paragraphs or lines, going one step beyond subbing in variables. Can you do that?
So this is essentially the trade-off right now between having a template that you use again and again that's pretty much set up the way you want it to be versus one that is totally dynamic. And you can have the in-between as well. You can have fields that are going to be replaced with AI, and those might be the whole body of the document, but we always want the header and the footer to look exactly the same, for example. Like a case caption of a court case, for example, might be exactly the same, but maybe your argument section is going to be dynamic. And you can have that be totally generated by AI if you'd like. It's really up to you how you want to set that up in the template. Okay. So what I've done here with this case is I've taken, again, our case about Jane Doe. It's now in the docassemble environment, and I've set up a couple of pre-canned tasks that you might want to do with that information. Ones that are oriented at a letter for the most part, although there's some that are kind of set up at here just to let you play around with them. So, for example, we could do a sentiment analysis if we wanted to, or make a case timeline. Let me show you what that would look like first. My next thing that I can do, and again, this is kind of in the prototype stage. We're going to play around with this interface a bit. But for now, you can manually choose all of the fields that you want to have included. These are all the fields that come from LegalServer. The more data you send to the AI tool, the more expensive this interaction is. Although, honestly, it's not very expensive to begin with. This is kind of the most common set of data you'd want to send, things like the case notes, for example, and basic contact information about the parties that are on the case. But there's lots of data that comes over from LegalServer, and you can see here, if you really want to, you could send all of it, but you probably don't need to. And even for now, we're letting you customize it a bit more by changing which model you use on the back end, changing the temperature or creativity, and even giving it extra instructions beyond the basic prompt that we have it set up with. Let's not change those things now. Just show you kind of the more basic experience you're likely to see. And I'll turn off these extra fields too. And again, remember what I asked it to do is to make a case timeline for me based on all of the data from the LegalServer case. So it's taken that. I can see how it looks formatted as a case timeline. And part of the instructions are that it is a letter still, because this is really a document-oriented tool. If I like this draft, great. If not, I have two options. I can manually edit it by going in and changing this text. Or I can ask AI to revise it. Let's say this has to go to somebody who only speaks Spanish. And maybe I want it to be a lot shorter. I can type my instructions. So at this point, we don't have to resend all of that data. But if I wanted to, I could resend it. It's slightly increasing the cost again if we made that change. But maybe we do need to resend it because it got something wrong. It missed something in the original version of the LegalServer fields. All right, so it's taken that and it's kind of given us 1 second chance to edit it. You can imagine this kind of like you might work with ChatGPT. You have something, you revise it as a draft. But with the safety here of it all being protected by the enterprise privacy terms that you have when you talk with the API connecting rather than through the ChatGPT interface. So something else that maybe is a little bit more likely that you'd want to do is something like a closing letter for that client. Again, you can choose the language dynamically here. Let's try sending this closing letter in Chinese. And we're just doing simplified Chinese. So what it should be doing now is, again, should be putting in my information into that document, and it should be tailored to the case notes and the other information about the case status. And maybe this time I want it back into English. So let's try that. What we're doing with these tools is we're offering that as, so there, you need to have access to LegalServer's DocAssemble integration, which I understand is a one-time cost plus a $50 monthly cost. But we were offering hosting at a lower rate if you're using a shared server than it would cost if you were using a dedicated server just for your LegalServer organization. Which I think will make it really affordable. We haven't figured out if there's separate pricing or how the pricing is going to be structured yet for these AI features. But I'm not expecting it to be very large.
Question from Margaret is spreading and scaling. How do you kind of communicate this solution and allow others to use and adapt. How do you plan for this in your Lemma work DocAssemble community? So question generally about collaboration. How do you make this part of the kind of stream of thought on projects like this?
How do we, so this is a commercial product, and right now that's the way that we're thinking of it. But there's lots of room for us to innovate and collaborate, building custom things for folks. And also, I think we're open to ideas about how people want to iterate on it in a more open way. That just have to make sense for us. We're building a lot of it right now on spec, and hoping we get some adoption, to be honest. I think that we have a couple clients that are going to be starting to work with this right at the beginning.
I can imagine. Yeah, this is so useful and such a time saver. Can you imagine, or are there already automations, for example, to send a client a reminder about a court date, that would include the case, the court, the time, the date, and then either a letter generated to be mailed or an email or a text, something like that?
Well, let me show you. I think I can show you a couple other things that we've been working on. So one of the tools that we've been working with Greater Boston Legal Services on is a reminder system. I actually don't know if this link is going to work because it's something we've been testing that's not, I don't know if it's even in our demo environment yet. Okay. So it's a reminder tool. It's aimed at reminding opposing counsel that they've promised to do something for you on a regular basis without having to take the secretary's or paralegal's time to do that. In this case, the user is a consumer clinic who they're going to court and helping people get cases dismissed. If someone's collecting SSI, that debt collector is probably never going to see the money, but they're also probably not in a hurry to dismiss the case. So we've automated the process of sending them those reminders at regular intervals so they actually do that. That's something that I think you could do. You might not need AI for that. And actually, we're not using AI in this. It's just all rules-based. And I think that makes sense for something like that where you want to have exact reminders about specific dates. Let me show you one more AI-powered feature here, which is our questionnaire, interactive questionnaire tool. One thing that is kind of nice about using the DocAssemble backend is that you really have access to all of the data in a very kind of low-code environment where you have the ability to build custom things that no one has ever thought of. So again, I'm going to turn off this little extra information here. It's first on our test environment, but you don't need it. Okay. So what this tool imagines is, let's say you've done an intake on the client, but they left some information out. You could play phone tag with them for a while, and maybe they're going to tell you everything they need to do on their last message, or you can text or email them. Again, maybe you're going to get information, maybe you won't. So what we've done instead is imagine like maybe you want to let an autonomous little AI agent go out for you and try to get the rest of the information about the case that you need. So that's this goal. It's a question and answer tool. We've used like kind of the cheapest model here to generate some possible questions. So if you like, these are based on the current case status. It's going to come up with some ideas for things you might want to be wondering about. Who knows if those are things you are wondering about, but if they work for you, you can ask them here. If you want, you can say more about it. You have what you asked the person directly, and you can have kind of some things you want to make sure are in their answer. Those can be different. And if you want, you could also write a custom question. Let's try this. Anything that's important for us to understand. I'm not going to say anything about special information it needs. I could send the information from the case to help the AI with its question and answer process. So it already has some background. It might make it have better questions. I can say what language I want the information to be asked in. I'm not going to customize that either. Let's keep that in English. So at this point, this is a link that's given to the client to pick up that conversation and to start interacting with it until they've given everything they need to know, all the facts, to the advocate. Let's say, yes, last week I got a new notice. I think maybe I missed a court date. I can also upload some documents at this point here. Okay, in this case, it only had one turn, but let's see. If I had a more complicated question, see if we can get it to have a little bit more of a back and forth. This one's a little bit more focused here. And I'm going to intentionally have some typos in here. I think I've limited this to have 5 turns, and I'm going to probably have a bad job of having really specific ones. All right, I think I can say no here, and I think I'm going to be done with this. Let's see. All right, that was a longer one, maybe annoyingly one. This is why we're still testing this out to see if we can get that conversation to be just right. But what it's done is it's taken that whole conversation, all of our interactions, and it's added it as a case note to the LegalServer case. And you can see right now we're playing around with this idea of just showing it just like this as a conversation thread. We could do things like add a summary or show it in some other way. But that is the basic idea, that you can collect that information kind of autonomously. And of course, like what Michael was showing to you earlier with the pulling data, not just as notes, but as like maybe structured data, like filling in fields in the case. That's another way to take this and extend that feature.
This could be really great for trial prep too. Imagine you're trying to prepare a direct examination of your client, and then you get to see the entire thread and the answers and the questions, and then refine that without even being face to face with the client. Like you could be working on other stuff. So really cool. A lot of great applications. Shelley, I think we have 2 more minutes. Is that right? Should we save some time for live questions?
2 minutes is correct. And yeah, if you, people can ask away if they want to take advantage. Any other questions from the audience, or are you all just astounded as
Well,
I am about all the new things coming?
here's
Getting
one.
impressive.
I think a lot of us are wondering, how long do you think before all of us are using this regularly, tools like this? Is it 6 months, a year, 5 years? Like the, average attorney, paralegal, and legal services somewhere in America.
I have been really amazed at how far the cost of these has dropped down. So when I showed you that little thing where it generates 10 question ideas for you at the beginning, that wouldn't have made sense to do if it was 2 years ago, because it would have been too expensive when these tools first came out. Now, it literally, you'd have to run that 100 times before it cost a penny. So I just turned that feature on. And I think we're going to see these kind of possible AI assistant features popping up more and more because they're going so much cheaper than they ever had been before. I think we're looking at months, certainly not years, before we have more of this in most of the tools we use.
And we're going to dig into that maybe a little bit more at the end of the next session. So it is time for us to have another little break. There are a couple more questions coming in, so if anybody wants to jump into chat and answer those, we'd appreciate it. But thank you, Quinten and Michael and Sateesh, for sharing. We all got a little bit of a sneak peek on some things, and we really appreciate you sharing all of your secrets with us so that we can see that legal aid does have technology that is not, behind the times, as many people think of when they think of legal aid and legal tech. So thank you so much for joining us for this session. 10-minute break. We'll start up again at 4:10, and we're going to have a discussion on AI in law schools and get perhaps some predictions on the future of the profession and regards to AI. So thank you so much.